You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the Lower Decks episode, Reflections. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Father Cory Sticha. Hey, Father Cory.
How's it going?
And Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, be sure to follow The Secrets of Star Trek in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, your favorite podcast app. And now you can watch us as a video on YouTube at the StarQuest YouTube channel.
And we're not a static image. It's us moving and everything.
You can see us
waving at you.
One of them moving pictures.
Yeah, those fancy moving pictures. Not hologram yet. That's still a holodeck version of us is in the future. And be sure to hit the bell to get notifications of every new episode on YouTube. I want to tell you about another show on the network you are sure to enjoy called The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows. You can find that wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/secrets. I want you to stick around to the end of this episode. We have more of your awesome listener feedback. And I want to begin with a little bit of sad news, which is that the actress Louise Fletcher, who you may recall played Kai Wynn on Deep Space Nine. She passed away last week at the age of 88. And so we wanted to mention that and talk about a character we all love to hate, and she did such a good job with it.
So. She was great, and I like her redemptive arc in the final season of Deep Space Nine. I mean, even before then, there are places where even though she's an abrasive character, she genuinely cares about Bajor.
Yeah.
And she, at various points, like, even though it grates on her, she seeks Sisko's counsel and as the emissary. And then in season 7, they have the plot. Now, of course, she goes bad and then comes back and redeems herself at the fire caves in the last episode. But towards the beginning of that going bad process, Gul Dukat has turned himself into a Bajoran, or appears Bajoran, and he's trying to seduce her. And when she realizes that he is a worshiper of the Pa Wraiths, he's like trying to seduce her to the dark side and wants her to serve the Pa Wraiths. And she yells, "Heretic!" and slaps him. And the audience is like right there with her. That heretic needs to be slapped.
Yeah.
And it was one of the most authentic treatments of religious feeling in the history of the show.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. She was
she's a great actress. I mean, she really was most well known as Nurse Ratched in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, the Jack Nicholson movie. But of course, us in Star Trek, we know her from DS9. And she played that role so well, and just her dripping, "Oh yes, child."
Oh man, that was so grating. Oh, she was so good at that contemptuous and thing. I mean, it's hard. It's got to be hard to play a character that all the fans dislike, because it's not you, and so you've got to kind of help that people rise above the, I'm just acting. I'm not really that person. So God bless her. May she rest in peace. And
it's, even though you would not think that this happens, there are people who don't understand that acting is acting. Suzanne Lucci, who played Erica Kane on All My Children.
Yes.
Who was kind of, she's a bad girl in the sense that she's living this lavish lifestyle and is very selfish and stuff. And she's not unsympathetic. She's sort of the sympathetic bad girl. There were people who were convinced that Suzanne Lucci was really Erica Kane.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yes. Soap operas, especially since they are like on people's TVs every day in their living room sort of thing. Yeah, I can imagine that being hard for some people to separate the actor and the role.
Well, there are so many of those actors who they play one character very well, and they fit in that role. And that's not who the actor themselves is. They just can play that role so well.
Yeah, exactly. So, and like I said, God bless her. May she rest in peace. So let's talk about this episode of Lower Decks called Reflections. This is a one that focuses on Rutherford a lot. And Jimmy, can you give us a recap of what happens?
This week in our B plot, Mariner and Boimler are assigned to man a Starfleet recruiting booth at a job fair. Mariner thinks this is a lame assignment, but First Officer Ransom orders them to collect a bunch of names and not set foot out of the booth or there will be dire consequences. During the job fair, the people from other booths mercilessly mock the Starfleeters, especially a representative of the Independent Archaeologists Guild named Petra. Boimler helps Mariner keep her cool amidst all the mocking, but eventually the mocking becomes so severe that Boimler freaks out and goes on a rampage. His courage inspires the passers-by, and they approach Mariner for information about joining Starfleet. Ransom shows up, and since Boimler has violated orders by leaving the booth, he will have to spend the night in the brig, but nothing more serious than that. Meanwhile, back in our A plot, Rutherford has been having a nightmare about something overheating, and Tendi thinks it may be because of unimportant data in his implant's memory buffer. She flushes the buffer to let him get some sleep, but this has unexpected side effects. When he wakes up, he has no idea how he got on the Cerritos and is acting like a real jerk. Meanwhile, friendly Rutherford must helplessly watch his new jerk self from reflections on windows and screens. So friendly Rutherford is only seen in like the reflection on a window, and he's watching in horror at what his jerk self is doing. He thinks that new jerk self is an alien that has taken over his body, but it's really his former forgotten personality from 10 years ago. His brain can't handle both personalities being active, and he goes into a coma. The two Rutherfords must fight for dominance to emerge from the coma, and whoever loses will be permanently erased. In their mental environment, they can imagine anything they want, and they have an engineer off to build racing ships to do a mental version of an illegal race through the neutral zone. As they're doing this, a Romulan warbird attacks, and it turns out that friendly Rutherford also imagined his friends, Tendi, Mariner, and Boimler, to experience the flight with him. Working with his friends, they're able to escape the warbird and beam Jerk Rutherford back to safety on their ship. Jerk Rutherford was badly injured by the warbird, and he acknowledges that friendly Rutherford has grown in the last 10 years, that he gave up the rage that used to consume him, and he's actually made friends. This lets Jerk Rutherford fade out of existence in peace, and he thanks friendly Rutherford for letting him have one last race. Before he fades out, though, the two of them suddenly experience a buried memory. It turns out that 10 years ago, Rutherford was covertly building a racer for a high-ranking Starfleet officer when it overheated and exploded. That was the nightmare that Rutherford was having at the beginning, and in the wake of his injuries from the explosion, Rutherford's implant was attached to him. But the sinister officer said to wipe all Rutherford's extensive memories of him and the program he was working on, and to make him think that he got the implant voluntarily. Afterwards, the gang is reunited. With Boimler in the brig for the night, Mariner does the mission report, and as she's doing it, she gets a call from Petra, the independent archaeologist, who admits that she only mocked them to create a distraction so that she could get into a museum and steal back the Grand Negus's stolen staff so that she could turn it in for a reward. She also recognized Mariner's quality and offers her a job if she ever wants to leave Starfleet. Mariner ends the call, but saves Petra's contact information for the future. The end.
Or is it? So let's talk about the B plot involving Mariner and Boimler first, and then we'll come back to Rutherford. I like this. So they're orbiting this planet, and they get assigned.
Which they've actually been to multiple times in the series. It's called Tulgana 4.
Right. Mm-hmm. And they get assigned to man this, Starfleet recruiting booth, because apparently this is a thing that happens when Starfleet ships visit Federation worlds. They're supposed to do, some recruiting. And of course, Mariner hates the idea of it. And she starts to refuse until Ransom threatens her, says, if you don't do this, I'm going to transfer you to Starbase 80. And they're all like, no, it's the worst. And you're like, what is so bad about Starbase 80 that everyone is like horrified by it? I just thought it's funny.
Yeah, I like how as soon as Ransom says that, Boimler just cringes. visibly, and Mariner starts objecting. And then later at the end, even though he threatened them with Starbase 80, and Starbase 80 has been also mentioned in previous episodes as a really bad place to work.
Yeah.
But Ransom, Boimler, and Kayshawn are walking down the hallway, and Boimler is like, "Weren't you going to send me to Starbase 80? You know, because he's only going to have to spend the night in the brig." Mm-hmm. And Ransom says, "Oh no, that place is a hellhole." and Kayshawn says, "Koltar when he drowned in a swamp."
Yeah. So it's obviously really bad. I wonder if someday we'll see it.
That's what I was gonna say. I hope someday they show it and it actually turns out to not be that bad, but it's just like, like the Cerritos where it has a reputation.
I guess
it's a bad reputation,
I guess it's like in the Air Force getting threatened to be sent to was it Elmendorf Air Force Base in Alaska?
Or Minot.
Thule in Iceland.
Yeah, right.
Would be kind of cool, but literally. But no, Minot's the one where it's like Minot Friesen's the reason.
Minot's in North Dakota. Yeah, that's the middle of nowhere.
It's my area.
I know an Air Force chaplain there from Boston who, he says it's spare is the word he uses to describe it. So apparently Starbase 80 is sort of like that. So
I like one of the items they're bringing down for the Starfleet recruitment booth is a Kirk Spock face cutout photo board.
Yes.
So
yes.
You can stand behind it and have your pictures taken as Kirk and Spock.
Right. Because it assumes, like, again, the 2D nature of it, like we're in the future, holograms. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's just that's that kind of funny anachronism that they include. And then you mentioned their booth is next to, it's almost like a farmer's market sort of thing or a flea market. And their booth is next to the Independent Space Archaeologists Guild. And you have this, she's kind of a trope of the space archaeologists, like what's her name?
Sassy space archaeologist, like Vosh.
Vosh, that's what's thinking.
Yeah. Something like Laura Croft or something like that, for the Tomb Raider type games,
Right. And her name, of course, is Petra Aberdeen, which is, of course, a space archaeologist, name, that sort of thing. And she's so, like, she mocks them. She mocks Starfleet. I was in Starfleet, she says, and I left for a life of freedom and nonviolence. And they're like, Boimler's like, Starfleet's about nonviolence, and she points out how Starfleet claims to be about peace and nonviolence, but they always seem to be getting in fights with everyone. And it's kind of true.
And she says, "Oh, right, you guys totally aren't a pseudo Navy at all."
Yeah, you're totally not military. Yeah.
Yeah. And I kind of love that because, I mean, it's true. Like they're always talking about how we're not a military force. We just have ranks and we have ships armed to the gills and with shields and phasers and photon torpedoes, and we're always getting in battles and we have wars, but we're totally nonviolent. Yeah, and that's funny.
Later she's noting all the different uniforms. I like how they're hanging a lantern on tropes of the show.
Yes.
Because they're clearly a space navy, but Gene Roddenberry wanted to pretend they were about exploration.
Right.
And later they're talking about uniforms, and they're noting all the numerous different uniforms that are just constantly changing on the show.
Yeah.
And Boimler's justifying it. It's like, well, our uniforms are always updating. And Petra's like, yeah, because you're not a military.
And then they have, it's not just her, the conspiracy truthers who have a booth there as well. They show up demanding the truth about what happened to Cisco, what really happened to Cisco. Mm-hmm. And then what about the parasites who took over as Starfleet admirals by crawling up their butts?
Which is not, it was crawling down their throats.
Right, that's how it really happened.
But the conspiracy theorists think that it happened another way, and they refer to them as butt bugs.
Butt bugs.
and one of our two characters, I forget, I think it was Boimler, is like, that never happened, and Mariner is kind of like, actually, I think it did.
Boimler's like, that never happened. Absolutely never happened. Yeah.
That's the first season. There's a couple of episodes in the first season of Next Generation. One of them is called Conspiracy, where this plot is revealed.
Right, and we end up getting this really graphic, the most graphic thing ever on Next Generation, where they kind of explode this admiral, and we see like his it had body cut, it blown up in half on screen. It was very graphic. And then it's this sort of thing, like they kind of leave it as this cliffhanger of, oh, these aliens are out there, they're kind of trying to take over, and we never hear from them ever again. Like, it's just...
Yeah, they were originally going to be a lead into the Borg. And then they got to the Borg another way and kind of dropped these creatures.
Right. And so, I mean, the Starfleeters are being mercifully mocked by everyone. But it's when the outpost scientists, who show up again after that couple episodes ago, comes up and takes his rank pip, Boimler's rank pip, his ensign rank pip, and throws it away. And that's the most important thing to Boimler.
Someone steps on it. Yeah.
Yes. And Boimler loses his mind, starts destroying everything. And like, you people wouldn't exist without Starfleet. We don't want to fight the Borg and the Romulans. We want to explore and study quasars, but it's the right thing to do. And he goes on and on.
And then stop getting people trapped in your games. And
right. There was the gamesters from DS9 from that terrible episode. And then so on and so forth. Yeah, it was. And they also had the gamesters had the one from TNG with the eyes, like the addictive game, the Pokemon Go of that one where it's shooting into the eyes.
They also have the Collectors Guild, and like when what's his name wanted to collect data and add him to his collection, and he had these friends who had really weird makeup, including a sideways nose ring.
Right.
And so one of the Collectors Guild has a sideways nose ring in this.
Yeah.
I like when Boimler freaks out, he's like, without Starfleet, none of you would exist. We don't want to protect you from the Klingons and the Borg. We just want to explore and study bleeping quasars. But you know what? It's the right thing to do.
Yes, exactly. So in the, like you said, in the midst of this distraction, that's when Aberdeen, who was obviously, turns out, goading them into having this display because she wanted them to cause a distraction. She uses that to go into the museum that they're sitting in front of to steal back the Grand Negus's walking stick that they had acquired improperly, apparently. And so this would be Rom's now. Yes, exactly. Yes, it would be fun to have Rom show up. Rom would be a fun addition to Lower Decks. He's the right kind of character. Rom and Quark would be fun to have. I'd love to see that. And Boimler, like you mentioned, ends up in the brig, but Ransom does tell Boimler, like, I'm proud of you for standing up for Starfleet, even though I have to put you in the brig for violating regulations. I'm so proud of you. So we keep getting these nice moments where the Lower Deckers are kind of succeeding in a way. This season we're seeing them succeed more than we have in the past and advance. So that's kind of nice to have that from Boimler.
And Boimler's not kind of the guy who's just in the background getting kicked to the curb, and forgotten about, but he's actually getting recognition. We'll have a drink when you get out of the brig. Yes,
exactly. So let's go back to our A-plot and talk about Rutherford. So he has this nightmare, and it's funny when he wakes up from his nightmare. He's in their barracks area, their bunk area, and you notice it's the same big dude walking around in a towel from the last episode, like who gets surprised by him and squeaks, a high-pitched squeak.
He has this incredibly girlish ee.
So I wonder if we're going to keep seeing this guy walking around in his towel. It's going to be like the towel guy.
Recurring theme,
yeah. And you mentioned Tendi purges Rutherford's memory cache to let him sleep. And this has come up before, by the way, about the implant, and that there's something sinister, something unknown that Rutherford isn't even aware of, having to do with his implant and his memory being altered. So this is the most we got of this in this episode, though.
It is, and it also, so this episode has a couple of things that will obviously play into the season arc, because we're not quite, but almost at the halfway point in the season now. And one of them is Mariner will at some point follow up with Petra about the Junior Archaeologist League.
Yep.
Because we've got the tension with her and with her and Ransom about will she stay in Starfleet or not. And so at some point that will reach a boiling point, and it may be just like Boimler departed at the end of season 2, or at season one, at the end of season one, and then they brought him back in season two. Mariner may depart at the end of season three, and then they bring her back in season four.
Right.
The other thing, though, is there's a poster for season three, and the poster is kind of modeled off of some of the Search for Spock posters, but it has a Romulan warbird and the Cerritos attacking each other, just like there was a Klingon bird of prey and the Enterprise attacking each other on the Star Trek 3 poster. And then in the background in space, you have Rutherford's face instead of Spock's face. And then in the foreground, just like you had the other main characters besides Spock looking befuddled and dramatic, you have Tendi, Mariner, and Boimler looking scared and perplexed. And so this episode gives us the clues we need to unlock the season 3 arc. This is the search for Rutherford. Yeah. We're going to learn about Rutherford's forgotten memories. He's going to turn out to have been involved because what he was participating in were something they called Devon races, which go through the neutral zone and are therefore illegal. And so he was involved in some kind of covert classified project on behalf of Starfleet superiors to penetrate the neutral zone. And that's what led to all this. The thing blew up. They put his implant on him. They wiped his memory of the program. And so that's all going to reemerge now. In fact, when just before Jerk Rutherford fades out, we have a reenactment of the moment. They're still in the mindscape, but Jerk Rutherford is laying down, being cradled by friendly Rutherford, and Jerk Rutherford touches his face and says, "Remember." and just like at the end of Star Trek 2. And so obviously we're going to get more emergent memories by the end of the season, and we'll get an explanation of what the plan was.
So we do know that the 8th episode of the season is going to be called Crisis Point 2 Paradoxus. First season we had Crisis Point, which was a holo program that Mariner ran.
Badgie.
Right. Badgie and other things. And so this is sort of a revisiting that, and might be that a holo program brings out some of these memories or something along those lines. It's involved, but I gather from what I've read is that this is the big, season reveal episode. This is what's going to be the big, at least the start of maybe a 3-episode arc or something along those lines, connected to all this big story that they're telling. So that should be interesting to see. So I like this. This is kind of a mirror episode. We have the good guy, the good version of our guy, and the bad version. Except it's not a mirror universe episode. It's literally a mirror version of him, which was kind of fun.
Also, the title Reflections relates to. It has a metaphorical meaning of when you reflect on a subject, and there's reflection going on in that sense. But also, friendly Rutherford is confined to being a reflection. Right. For much of the episode. And he thinks that as I mentioned, an alien has taken over his body, but specifically he thinks it's an anaphasic alien. And it's like, oh man, that is a callback to one of the worst or possibly the worst episode of Next Generation.
Which one was that?
It's Sub Rosa, and it's the one where Beverly Crusher gets seduced by an anaphasic alien who is impersonating her grandmother's Scottish lover ghost thing.
Yeah,
and it's absolutely horrendously bad. I have no idea how Gates McFadden was able to
Poor Gates.
do that episode.
Yeah, no kidding.
I always cringe for her.
Well, I know, because she for the camera has to simulate intimate time with a ghost.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh,
that we don't even see in that scene. Yeah. And it's like, ugh.
I love how they kind of call out these bad parts of Trek without in that love. We've talked about this before, in this loving way. We love Star Trek. They obviously love Star Trek. But yeah, we know we've got our, over 50 years plus, we've got our bad moments. And so we'll embrace them for you. What's interesting about this reflected Rutherford is he's not reversed. It's not a literal mirror image, so that when you see him, the the visor is on the opposite side from the version in reality.
It's as if it was duplicated and standing in front of each other or facing each other. It's not a mirror, so it's as you be facing right, left, and so it's.
Yes. So at first, Mirror Rutherford tries to, the bad Rutherford tries to fit in badly. He alienates the girl that Rutherford had gone on 4 dates with. Barnes, that's right.
The Trill girl, yeah.
Yes. And asked that question, which doesn't bear repeating, that someone once asked Dax, and it's kind of offensive. Well, it's
not that bad. Do those spots go all the way down?
I guess. So. I mean, if they could say it on broadcast television in the 90s, it's not that bad. So, but
and they later answered the question because we saw Ezri getting out of bed and her spots went all the way down to her feet.
That's right. That's right. But he messes up, in some way. And so Shax has to hunt him down, to go capture him. And just before he, knocks him out, he's
trying to steal the captain's yacht, which is another piece of Star Trek lore. They decided for Next Gen that the captain has a personal shuttlecraft known as the captain's yacht, which looks different than other shuttlecraft, and they never showed it on screen. They never did anything with it. But Patrick Stewart decided that his yacht's name was Calypso.
Right. And then if you look at the Enterprise D model, it's on the bottom of the saucer. There's an outline of it. That's opposite where it would attach.
Bridge.
Opposite the bridge, right.
Yeah, Voyager had one. Of course, we see in, which was that Insurrection, where the E, we get to see the captain's yacht and the E.
Yes. Yeah, we do. Yeah. And so as Shax knocks him out, he says, "Sorry, baby bear," and Bad Rutherford is like, "Baby bear? Oh my gosh!" Like rejects it. But
that's my nickname. That's stupid.
Right. So what we find out is that this split it's between this memory and personality of Rutherford post the accident and the memory and personality of Rutherford from a decade ago before the accident. And what's happened is it's like a backup has overwritten his present brain, is how they put it.
And it kind of split the brain. They said partition it, where, of course, they show the obligatory, sick bay picture where there's one brain in one side of the brain, one color, on one side of the other color, and it's the different brain patterns.
Right.
He also says that, friendly Rutherford asks him, "Well, haven't you ever tried to get out?" And he says, "Yeah. Have you ever noticed your thing glitching? That was me trying to take control."
Right. And we've seen the glitches a lot. We've seen, the hints throughout. So they've been planning this for a long time. And that's why you've been the root of the character.
I like that, as the whole thing about pears was because pre-accident Rutherford loved pears, and post-accident Rutherford hates pears.
Right. There's a thing where people, even like today, will have traumatic brain injuries, will have changes in personality like that.
Oh, yeah.
Even changes of accent, that sort of thing.
The famous one is this guy in the 19th century. We may talk about him on Mysterious World at some point, but he was a railroad worker, and they were laying railroad, and he got a railroad spike driven through his head. Oof. And his personality completely changed. He had previously, only his went in the other direction. He previously had been a nice, conscientious guy, and he became like angry, cantankerous, violent criminal, and alcoholic.
Wow. I remember a case of this, what was it, like a housewife in South Florida or something, like, who had an injury, who, like, after her injury, total change of personality. She became kind of like wild party girl with a British accent and that sort of thing.
Foreign accent syndrome. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting how personality and that sort of thing is not kind of ontologically who we are. It's not from our essence, in a sense. It's malleable. And so this episode, in a way, kind of demonstrates how that can happen in a funny way. So they need to compete to control the body. This is a common science fiction trope.
I like how Mirror Rutherford. I'm using that for the one in the mirror.
Yeah,
friendly Rutherford figures out he can punch his implant and it will cause pain for jerk Rutherford.
Right. Yeah, that's good. And that's how he kind of starts, getting everyone to realize what's going on. And so, yeah, you mentioned he was an illegal drag racer who would build these racing, basically an engine with a seat on it to do these races through the Romulan neutral zone, which is, obviously really bad. And so the competition to get control of the body, after they kind of fight about it for a bit, they decide we're going to compete to build a racer and then race it. That's the competition. Yeah.
I like how friendly Rutherford then makes a Delta Flyer.
Yes.
From Voyager. And then Jerk Rutherford unveils what he's done. And it's a Battlestar Galactica Viper.
It's essentially what it looks like, yeah.
With Starfleet engines on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The cells, yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, in terms of design factor, Viper says this is a cool, badass vehicle more than a Delta Flyer's design does.
In fact, even a good Rutherford, friendly Rutherford, acknowledges it was pretty cool. But
although
the
warp engines look stupid on it.
Yeah, they do. And I mean, I kind of like it. I mean, I always, of all the things in Voyager, the Delta Flyer was always I like the Delta Flyer, the idea of it, and just a cool shuttle, because you gotta have a cool shuttle.
Well, of course, this is a callback to the Voyager episode where they race the Delta Flyer and they have the uniforms on and everything.
Yeah.
Paris and
was it B'Elanna?
B'Elanna, yeah. Paris, B'Elanna, then they've got those uniforms on. So, of course, Rutherford has to recreate the uniforms as well for his crew. He,
of course.
Also recreates his friends.
Right. And that's the thing is, they kind of make the point, in a very obvious way, which is that what makes good Rutherford good, in what makes good people good, is the people. It's the friends you made along the way, you might say. And so what makes him succeed is not that he's a badass engineer who builds hot rods, but that his friends are there to help him in need, even when they were imaginary, brain friends.
I like that. Brain friends.
Brain friends.
Hang out with my brain friends.
It's kind of sad, but yeah, brain friends.
Incidentally, note that on both Voyager and Battlestar Galactica, they have someone build a new ship. Mm-hmm. So even though they have Vipers on Battlestar Galactica and they have shuttles on Voyager,
many of them.
Yeah, they both have a lot of them. Tom Paris builds the Delta Flyer.
Yeah.
And Kara Thrace builds the Blackbird.
Right.
And I don't hate to say it, but once again, Battlestar Galactica outclasses Voyager. because Tom Paris builds the Delta Flyer as a racing ship for fun, and Kara Thrace builds the Blackbird as a stealth ship to gain military advantage.
Yeah.
And there's a great scene where they're testing the Blackbird and Apollo is on a Viper looking for Kara, and he's concerned. He's lost track of her and he's freaking out, and she sneaks up behind him and she says, "It's a damn stealth ship, Lee."
That's right. I remember that. That was good. Oh man. I used to love, just speaking of Battlestar, the SQBN had that podcast many years ago with Jeff and Xena lists called The Secrets of Battlestar Galactica. You can find that in our archives on our website if you ever want to get a hankering for some classic podcasting from yore about Battlestar Galactica. So in the end, after the Romulan warbird destroys his hot rod, and he's beamed aboard, Bad Rutherford is beamed aboard the Delta Flyer, and he's dying, quote unquote, inside the brain simulation. Mm-hmm. He recognizes that all of his rage is gone now. Like, something in him has changed, and so I wonder, like, if the fact is good Rutherford has already won the brain, like he's already in control. That just by seeing the rage of the other personality dissipate. So I thought that was kind of a somewhat subtle writing. I mean, for Lower Decks, it's subtle. And then he does the Spock mind meld, which I loved, like the whole remember, and he kind of even like growls a little bit like Leonard Nimoy. Mm-hmm. And Yes, we have a rogue Starfleet program that went wrong. So it's interesting. I wonder, Jimmy, because as you were describing it, it kind of came to me. I wonder if this is Section 31 trying to build a stealth ship to spy on the Romulans in the midst of these races.
It could be, but the Starfleet officer looked to me like he was wearing command colors. I mean, he was blurry and we saw him in mostly silhouette, but I thought he was wearing command colors rather than a Section 31 uniform.
Yeah, it was like the red uniform.
Yeah. Although we've seen Section 31 officer, in mufti in wearing Starfleet regular uniforms at times, right? They were recruiting Bashir to be Section 31 in situ in DS9. So it's possible. I'd be curious to see how Section 31 would work in Lower Decks. That would be kind of fun to see. That would be a nice addition to it. So I hope to see that. So, and that's where we bring things to an end with Rutherford. So any other notes, Father Cory?
There's a great line when Mariner was complaining about having to do the recruitment booth, about how an alternate universe where Kirk and Spock have cinematic chemistry, kind of referring to versus the JJ verse movies.
Yeah. Right. That's true, Kelvin. Yeah. That's good. Jimmy, anything left, Father Cory?
That's it.
Okay. Jimmy?
I like when they're first talking about the recruiting booth mission, Mariner is having a very negative reaction and Rutherford is like, yeah, but what you going to do about it? And she's like, complain about it and make it a more miserable experience than it has to be. And he's like, oh, that's kind of your thing.
Don't we all know someone like that? No.
Yeah. And
if you don't, maybe you're it. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. And then later, when after Rutherford has been taken over by Jerk Rutherford, I'm not saying evil Rutherford because he's not really evil. He's just a jerk.
Yeah.
He comes back into the shuttle bay where Tendi and he had been working earlier, and she's got this pod plant in a glass bubble, and she's like, hey, look at this pod plant from Omicron Ceti 3. It sprays alien mind control pollen. and this is from the original series episode, This Side of Paradise.
Yep.
Which was a drug analogy episode where they go to Omicron Ceti 3 and they all get sprayed by these weird looking pod plants with spores. And they get really relaxed and don't want to leave the planet. And Spock gets to smile and fall in love for the first time. And it's a very memorable episode, but I just love them bringing that back, the pod plant. And I love how they've got it in glass, so it keeps trying to spray them.
Yeah.
And it's just as they're walking around the glass and talking about it and even ignoring it, it just keeps trying to spray them. and it can't because of the glass.
Yeah, that is good. All right. So let us move on to our feedback. I promised some feedback. We have an email from listener Ryan who writes, Lower Decks has become one of my favorite additions to the Trek franchise. Every episode they find new ways to be nostalgic without ruining the canon and still continue a new storyline. I can't remember the last time I was excited to watch a new Trek show or movie without also being fearful of what Hollywood laziness I'm about to witness. The blink and you miss it content is great, and I really enjoy hearing you guys review each episode. Keep up the great work and live long and prosper. And that's an example of it, Jimmy, right? The plant, just they just throw that in there. It's a deep cut.
Well, I mean, if you sit there and listen to Boimler's rant, you'd have probably about 20 episodes mentioned in that 1 minute rant.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I really agree with our correspondent. I really like this show. To me, this is the best of the new Star Trek shows. I like Strange New Worlds, and I like Prodigy.
Yeah.
But this is the best.
Yeah.
And then Picard, I'm okay with. Discovery, I actively loathe.
Yeah.
But even in like Strange New Worlds, I mean, we've only had one season of it, but still it was like, okay, what are we going to have this week that is, wokeism, thrust into the story. And we have much less of that on Lower Decks, and the entertainment value is higher.
there's a lot of laughs in Lower Decks, and you can't discount that. That's a lot of fun. I'm personally, I might rank Strange New Worlds a little higher, but it's close. And hey, it's an embarrassment of riches, frankly, at this point.
Yeah, exactly. Between the two of them, the two of them, they're both worth watching.
Definitely,
so it's a good thing.
Well, thank you, Ryan. I appreciate you sending that in and for your appreciation for the show. So we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Trek, including Roseanne M., Kevin C., Meg P., Matt and Erica Z., and Slow. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest, and you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. We'd love to hear what you thought of this Lower Decks episode called Reflections. You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. You can send an email to trek@sqpn.com or visit our Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. We'll be back next week when we'll be discussing the next new episode of Lower Decks. Until then, Father Cory Sticha, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Star Trek.
Thank you, Dom.
Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
Thanks, Dom, and live long and prosper.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest, and remember, the Doctor didn't spend 7 years in the Delta Quadrant for you to question his agency. He's got rights.